Hello, everyone, and welcome to NIL Edge. Today, we're especially excited to be joined by Grant House, current professional swimmer and former collegiate athlete. Grant, thank you so much for joining us today. And how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here today, and I'm excited to chat with you. I'm really glad to be on the podcast.
I know that you have been very busy training for the Olympic trials. And so, again, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk to us a little bit about something that's very near and dear to your heart. And that's kind of where I want to start. So, can you first tell us, Grant? Obviously, there's probably a lot of people know that the house and house settlement comes from your name. But before we dive into that, I want to know just a little bit about you. Tell me how long you've been swimming, how you got into swimming, how you became a collegiate swimmer in the first place.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate putting the human first, and I appreciate the anecdote of a lot of people knowing, because I've kind of come across that the last couple of years, that not a lot of people. So we'll get into that later. But for the simple stuff, my name is Grant House. I grew up in Southeast Indiana in a small town called Bright. My parents were educators, teachers, and swim coaches. They created a club team. They created a high school team. They both swam in high school. My father swam at West Point and then Eastern Kentucky University. So go Eels. And he swam in college as well. And then they became educators and coaches. And then they moved shortly after they had my oldest sibling, my sister, Ashley. She is 42 currently. She'll be celebrating her birthday this year. And they moved to Southeast Indiana. And then they started a club team, which they had for over 30 years. So my sister swam in high school. She swam through college. My brother, he's 9 years older than me. He is 37 right now. And he swam through high school, the same high school that my parents taught at and they made the program at, and my sister swam at. And then he also went to college at Purdue University and then transferred to Charlotte, North Carolina to go to a Division II school as their first athlete, Queen's University. They continued on to be 8-time national champions. And then now they actually just made the jump to Division I as of this coming year. So that kind of set the precipice and the stage for me to grow up by the chlorine, grow up cribside by the pool, and to hear the splashes, hear the whistles, hear the stopwatches all along my early ages from 3 months on. And I was just kind of in an environment, in a community, a very loving community that loved sports, loved competitiveness, loved uplifting one another to achieve your goals. And stayed in Southeast Indiana for 14 years, went to Cincinnati, Ohio, to St. Xavier High School to pursue higher academic and athletic opportunities for myself. And I came out to Arizona State because I saw a lot of opportunity. I knew what it was like to be a part of a legacy at St. Xavier, one of the best high school programs in the country, particularly for swimming, and wanted to kind of make that a home at Arizona State. I wanted people to say that at Arizona State when they came through, that this is one of the best programs in the country, if not the best, to make it a national championship team, a program. It was beautiful, sunshine and palm trees everywhere out here in the desert, surprisingly. It was not gray skies like the Midwest. And I saw no reason for there not to be so much success, especially for the swim team, and just so much opportunity out here that I wanted to come lead it and come be a change maker in it and come be some opportunity to really catapult it into really a landscape and spotlight that the sport of swimming had never seen before. And when I started college here in 2017, by the end 2023, we were NCAA runners up, and then our highest finished ever. And then the year after, we were national championships for the men's swimming program. So it was pretty incredible to see that come to fruition. Not everyone gets to see their goals blossom like that over such a long period of time of 6 years. But I've been training out here since 2017, professionally since 2024, and still training out here at Arizona State, pursuing my goals to LA 2028 Olympic Games.
That's amazing. First, congratulations.
Thank you.
On simply on everything. But I want to go. So your collegiate career, 2017, obviously there's no NIL. That doesn't happen until a couple of years later. When during your collegiate career did you first begin thinking that something wasn't working in the system of being a collegiate athlete?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the process of first having those early visions and ideas of it was when I started connecting with the upperclassmen that were leaders in the athletic department or on the team and the program, and hearing their kind of wisdom over 5 or 4 years that they'd gained, and seeing what I can do better as a freshman and for the team, for the program, for the school. And it really started with being, a captain on the program and getting involved in the student bodies for the athletes. With the leaders that we had at the Student Athlete Advisory Committee, SAC. I think it's a little different elsewhere in some other schools, but I think for ASU, I feel like every year we accomplish some singular task, if not more. It's not always that effective, but basically it just became this step ladder that I've kind of grown to appreciate and reflect on, of helping lead my team of 60 people. And then taking the next step of representing just outside my program for the school, 600 people, 600 college athletes, and then being chosen to be a representative for the Pac-12 on behalf of Arizona State for, I like to say, about 6,000 athletes. Not all the schools have in the Pac-12 have all the sports, so roughly I'd say about 6,000, a little more, a little bit less. And each level, there was an opportunity to speak up for my team, maybe against administrators or coaches, and they didn't like that. I understand now, being 28, why not? But, and then at the school level, 600, talking to the administrators and speaking about things that other teams were afraid to speak on, but I was the leader that I had to do that. That was my responsibility. And then even up to the commissioner level, of calling out the commissioner in front of all of his peers, and the FARs, the athletic directors, the SWAs, and the student athletes that were up there as well. So each level just presented this opportunity where I just felt this compelling nature to speak up for what I felt was right. That was the status quo, and to challenge myself to be better on behalf of others, so others had better opportunities.
So this might be kind of a loaded question, but how do you go from that to then being like, all right, we're going to file a lawsuit against the NCAA? Like, that's very like Nicolas Cage, like, all right, we're going to steal the Declaration of Independence. What kind of what thought goes into there? And can you walk us through kind of that process?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd first like to just say that that's high praise, being with Nicolas Cage, the echelon there. So I think for me, it really grew in just competency of swimming. Every time you set a goal, you work every single day to get that. So the margins that you see, you don't really see until like 365 days later.
Yeah.
But they typically amplify in really big ways. So while I went through the moment of 60 people, 600, 6,000, it became that like every single year it was a compounding. It wasn't just like forget that 60 and then move on.
Yeah.
It was kind of a compounding nature. And when I had the opportunity, I would say that it wasn't just one dramatic moment. Like I said, it was the accumulation of experiences. And I really feel like I understood the principle of what was going on. I just didn't understand the magnitude of how far reaching it would be. I was like, college athletes, Olympic sport athletes should have this opportunity. I've been on ESPN. I've been on CBS Sports. I've been on like Fox Sports before for like Team USA opportunities. I've been on broadcasting, NCAA. And I was like, I've seen other Olympic gold medalists. I've seen Olympic silver medalists like on TV. They should have that opportunity too. I didn't really quantify it into like, wow, this is going to impact 550,000 individual lives every single year for the rest of time.
Yeah.
Until about 2 years into it. I'm mature enough to admit that now. And that's actually something that I'm very proud of, because I changed my education course to my master's degree, sports law and business, at the Sandra Day School of Law in Arizona State, to become a better leader and try to be that. And I know I don't have to be the expert in every field, but to be a better leader, you need to definitely have a good knowledge base and education base to be able to speak up and advocate for those around you.
So obviously when your name gets attached to the lawsuit, that probably like adds a level of significance to it, right? What were the conversations like? Because obviously you weren't the only athlete that brought, that was involved in the complaint, right? But your name is the one that's associated with it. Like, did that help you realize how significant what was happening was, when then it's like, oh no, this isn't, athletes v. the NCAA. This is House v. the NCAA.
Yeah, that realization, I'd say the hardest part of it came pretty quickly. That learning curve was rather logarithmic and exponential in some regards too, of getting 50 messages from my mom and 5 missed phone calls within the matter of a couple minutes. When the title in the article goes out that Grant House sues the NCAA.
Yeah.
Which is a giant clickbait headline. It has some semblance of truth in it, but not any capital T truth or whole truth at all. So I kind of learned that very, very quickly, earlier than I thought. The notice and the complaint was filed about almost 2 weeks before I was told it was going to be. So I didn't have the time to tell my family properly in as much depth as I knew I could. The coaches that I was being involved with at the time, the administrators, even my friend groups. But I'd say the hardest part was that people attach everything they feel about the issue to you personally.
Yeah.
As if you are the only person involved in this, that I was the only person getting this collection of damages from the NCAA, that I was doing it myself. And I think some people, I would say a large majority of everyone, misunderstood it and wasn't willing to educate themselves. And that was really the hardest part, to go through 5 years from 2020 to 2025 with really one-way conversations of, we just want to tell you we hate you.
Can you walk us? Yeah, no. Can you walk us through just like very briefly on the timeline of it all, of like when the complaint was first, like when the complaint was when you started, and then when the complaint was actually filed, to then the actual judgment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the timeline is really important to kind of understand the context of it. I'd say there's kind of 5 or 6 points that it kind of goes one main event per year, I'd say. In 2020, I was approached with this opportunity, and after by a teammate, and her mother was involved and worked at the firm that represented the case, Hagens Berman, headed by Steve Berman himself. And I didn't know all that at the time, but basically it was like, I heard, "Mom, I know the perfect person." I was given a phone. So after a series of interviews, and just kind of like a checklist, I just thought it was like a interview series for some news article, press release on behalf of Olympic athletes that had competed at the NCAA and Team USA. That continued on for about a month and a half, 2 months, and then got to a point where, would you like to represent all Olympic athletes? From there, I said, yeah, it made sense. I think they deserve the opportunities to make money. That didn't seem right to me for the last couple of years. And it was just like a no-brainer to me. It was like, oh, yeah, everyone's going to agree with this. Everyone else is trying to leave college early to go play professional sports. Swimming doesn't have a professional league at the time, so we just don't know about it or don't feel it. But every other sport goes into a pro league. So I make one call in June of 2020 to one of my biggest mentors and a fatherly figure in my life. He was my water polo coach, but he worked at the longest standing law firm in Ohio as a lawyer, as a practicing lawyer still. And he was probably only the one person out of about 50 people that I talked to, from administrators, coaches, lawyers, sports law, that he was like, "Grant, I think this is going to turn into something bigger than we realize." So we fast forward about a couple more months, 2020, the news headline gets released. It gets pumped out. We go to 2021, California and Florida basically take charge and are saying, we're gonna make NIL possible. We're doing this. Like, we don't care what anyone else says.
Yeah.
So the original lawsuit complaint was to basically put into place NIL.
Yeah.
And so when they did that, the NCAA kind of freaked out. They panicked, and they made a really immature decision right away. Just like, okay, no rules, regulations. We're gonna make NIL legal for everyone. And that happened over about a 12-day period. So now we're at July 1st, 2021. NIL is legal. They reframe the context of the lawsuit to have 3 prongs. One would be representation of Olympic sport athletes, back damages pay for a precedent of 5 years. So 5 years from when the complaint was filed, from 2021. So those athletes that were in college could collect benefits off of their time as an athlete being broadcasted as well too, and competing out of fairness. The other 2 were for women's and men's basketball revenue sharing and media rights, and then men's basketball revenue sharing and media rights. Basically, from then on, the judicial process takes over. And it's just a very slow process of various negotiations in 2022, different stages in 2023. I switched my major to go to sports law and business to understand and become a better advocate, I'd say, better leader, and to champion this a little bit better. Kind of realized at that point the magnitude and how much this was going to impact the eternity of college sports for the rest of our lives. And I wanted to take more charge of that. Into 2024, there were more parts of this going into play. Jeffrey Kessler, I believe, in 2023 to 2024, joined the case, and I was preparing for the Olympic trials. So I was taking on a lot of negativity. I'd received death threats at that point. And so I was taking a big step back to prepare for my third Olympic trials, and the moment that I felt like I had the strongest opportunity to compete and represent Team USA at the Olympics for my biggest aspirations and goals. So I took months, weeks, days at a time off social media across everything, because everything I encountered was just negativity, hatred, frustrations, lack of education putting onto me. And I just didn't need that. I didn't know how to process that at the time. And then we get to 2025. The final hearings are happening. A lot of hearings are happening. Backroom negotiations have been occurring between the lawyers of the NCAA and the lawyers of Hagens Berman. And so I go to a competition in 2025, March. I compete in Sacramento. I go down to Oakland for the final hearing with Her Honor, Judge Claudia Wilkins. I was in the courtroom, and being present, I felt like that was very, very important for me personally as a leader, but also for the sentiment of the event, of being the representative there in person on behalf of athletes. And basically from there on out, it got to June of 2025. I'm competing at nationals in Indianapolis, ironically the NCAA headquarters. And I compete day 1, day 2, day 3. I'm off day 4. I'm with my brother in his hotel room when we're talking, and I go to bed. I leave to go to bed, and he comes running out of the door, bursts it open. He said, "Grant, it's finished. It's done. It's over." And I'm like, "We got to meet tomorrow. Like, we got one more day. I got another event." He's like, "No, the lawsuit, they just made the final say on it. You won." And that was really intense for me to process. I remember the next morning was like the hardest race I'd had, like top 3 all time. I felt like it was like a cathartic release almost, because that night felt so good and so relaxed. And I felt like I lost like 50 pounds. And since then, it's just been this process of the judicial system taking over and going through the appeals. But the best part about this time frame is, since 2025, June, has been the uptick and the increase in two-way conversations. And I finally feel like the resistance of not moving forward on behalf of college athletes and 550,000 humans is finally lessening. And we're actually having some discussions, or the starts of some discussions, to think of how can we evolve? How can we not just put out these forest fires? And how can we actually have thoughts and ideas to solve these things and create solutions?
I want to kind of spend the next couple of minutes. I think we've done a great job covering the past. I want to kind of go like focus on the now and focus on the future. When you look at the NIL environment at this very moment, what are you like most excited about, and what are you most proud of?
I think what excites me the most is really that athletes finally have permission, if you will, to think bigger. They can build brands, run camps, create content, partner with businesses, support their families, support their lives, support their communities. Really actually learn real world skills and while they're in school, while they're in this kind of like, I would say, when I look back on my college time and being on the campus, like a trial by fire playground of just all these opportunities to learn and to fail, like kind of safely. NIL isn't just about money. And I think done correctly, it can be career development or great learning opportunities that while you're giving everything to these 4 years, athletically and academically, that you can build some of these skills actually, not just like, what does discipline look like by waking up in the morning? It's like showing up. Yes, it can be big for some people at some points in their life, but at the end of the day, it's like the bare minimum of what you need to have the highest level of performance. So I think what excites me is it really gets them harder, more concrete skills to develop into their careers well after athletics ends, whenever that may be, whether it's 21, an injury. Well, now it's 5 years, no more of the shenanigans, and beyond, or even if they're going to go pro for a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, the NFL is short. When I trained at Exos as a coach, they always said it stood for not for long. The average length is about 2.3 to 3 years in length of contract. So I think that excites me the most, is they have much more longer time frames to develop bigger skills than just playing on the field, swimming in the pool, being on the grass.
You've obviously probably had a lot of noise involved in all of this process, to say the least, right?
Yeah.
And somebody's grandpa or somebody's uncle, the one who's always stirring things up at Thanksgiving is like, so did you hear now that athletes are getting paid in college as if a scholarship wasn't good enough for them? What do you wish that person better understood about athlete compensation?
I think it's a great example. That's a pretty popular one, I would say too. Maybe not the dining table, but in passing a lot too.
Yeah.
I think what I wish fans understood is that athletes aren't becoming millionaires. It doesn't apply to everyone. It's not like that they're not grateful or not appreciative of the opportunities that we're getting with scholarship, athletic scholarship, and tuition. I always refer back to a study that the Pac-12 themselves produced, that on average, athletes are reporting 50 hours of work a week.
Yeah.
And technically, we're only supposed to be at 20 hours, but that's recovery, that's PT, that's time traveling, competing, preparing for competition. And people just don't realize that, because you're really putting everything else on pause. If you're really performing at the highest level, or even if you're not really, you still have to show up to the training, and you're putting a lot of these avenues on pause for 4 years while your peers and your classmates are all doing the same thing you're doing, but have less responsibilities and less physical exertion in their lives.
Yeah.
And I just don't think people have gone through that endurance. They haven't gone through that suffering, that cycle of putting forth your best, succeeding, failing, coming up short, far exceeding your expectations. They haven't really done the time to do the hard work. And I do believe that should be compensated. It's compensated in literally 100% of other marketplaces in the entire world, in our country at least. And why shouldn't it be for that one? And I just think it should be allowed. Not every athlete is using it. Many are trying to cover rent, food, travel, family needs, recovery, something just for life after sport, to have a little bit of more of a kickstart, a running start. So when you graduate, you're not just like, oh, well, my sports were great, but now I'm 0 to 1 again. You have a little bit more of a running start. And I think athletes have always created value. If the players don't show up to the games, college football playoffs don't happen. That's how the college football playoffs and NCAA exist. That's how they make money off of it. So I think that athletes deserve a cut of that pie. And I think that's the biggest thing that I really want people to understand, is that it's not that we're not grateful. It's that times have changed. Phones didn't exist in 1910. And we need to evolve and change, just like we have in every other aspect of the world except for college sports. It's the craziest thing to me why people don't understand that.
This might be the most ultimate softball question that you've ever received, but would you do it all again?
Yes, 100%. 100%. I would absolutely do it all again. I think I never have regrets. There were definitely hard days for sure. It was difficult without it. It still is incredibly difficult. But I would rather be misunderstood trying to help more people move forward than stay silent because it was just easier. Because that's what we've done for decades and decades and decades and decades. And luckily we've had people like Jeremy Bloom, Ed O'Bannon, Sean Alston. And finally I was able to just kick down the door that they kind of tried to budge open in different ways and pave the way for that to happen. But yeah, no, without a doubt, I think a lot of people expect me to say the other way, but no, I don't regret it at all. It was extremely hard, but I think it's honestly a message for like younger peers and younger athletes too. Like, the most successful things you'll experience in life are hard, and I haven't seen a lot of success from this other than being empowered by this as a leader and believing in what this will evolve into. But I know it's impacted thousands and thousands of lives, and it will continue to compound to millions and millions for the continuum of college sports' lifetime. So yeah, no, that's an easy one for me. I would say not for most though.
I remember you talking about this as we wrap up here with these three last questions. You said something at AthleteCon that really stood out to me, and it was like your view on leadership. And how has this experience changed your view on leadership?
One of my favorite topics. Young Grant would have a much younger Grant entering college at 19 would have a much different answer than 28-year-old Grant now, almost a decade apart, which is kind of cool to have a little N of one case study example for myself. But leadership is not always loud and glamorous. I thought at one point I did think that. And I think social media confuses us as we're growing, especially a young athlete, that it has to be. Leadership is often very uncomfortable. I think some people say sometimes, but it's almost always uncomfortable until the end. The beginning, the middle, and even as you approach the end, it's still uncomfortable because you're getting to the mission, you're getting to the view. And sometimes standing in the middle of the criticism before broader culture catches up is your job, is your path. Like that, you are plowing the street ahead. I've learned that courage does not always feel like confidence. Sometimes it feels like anxiety. It feels like nervousness. But you have to do the right thing anyways. You have to stand up. You have to have that courage because a lot of the time, like I said, for decades and decades and decades, hundreds of thousands of millions of people didn't. And luckily for that situation, I was able to be, for whatever reason, chosen to be the person to do that. I was falling in the right place at the right time and chosen to do that and compelled to do that as well. So leadership is not always what's easiest to do. It almost never is. And it's not always the most comfortable, but it's oftentimes what's the most courageous thing to do.
So kind of our last serious question that I want to ask you here. When like years from now, when people hear the words house settlement, they'll think of, like legal documents, whatever. The purpose might fade away, but the result is always going to stay, right?
Yeah.
What do you want people to remember about the purpose that you guys pursued in the first place 30, 40, 50 years from now?
Wow. Profound question. I'll have to tune into this podcast in 20, 30 years, see if it played out. That's how you retain listeners. I'm impressed, Sterling. I would say we always joke about it. I don't joke about it. I said it very seriously as a captain in one of my last seasons with ASU is how do you want to be remembered?
Yeah.
And it's become a niche joke, I would say, but it rings true to me no matter if it's serious or true, and always gives me chills as to what legacy that you create. For me on my podcast, I always say like legacy outside the lane lines. And that's what this has largely become. And that's what largely sport allows us to do is how do you impact your teammates' lives around you? So to answer your question, like how should people remember this is I really hope people that remember that this was about athletes having a fair opportunity to participate in the value that they helped created. I referred to it earlier in the podcast about, the match doesn't happen without the players.
Yeah.
It was about giving athletes voices, giving young adults more power, more dignity, more education, more protections. I believe that's hopefully to come in the next couple of years. But like you said, the legal documents matter, but human reason and human lives and human well-being matters a lot more. And athletes and people just to have opportunity to that, they just deserve a system that saw them as partners, not just performers. And as the power that the players provide, that's really what I want them to remember is the fair opportunity and an equal playing field for them to take advantage of it. Because you can choose to do a corporate job. You can choose to be a janitor. There's 1,000 million, a billion other jobs in between those two. But everyone else gets the freedom to do that. And for whatever reason, college athletes just didn't have those same freedoms. And I think they deserve that.
Honestly, what you just said reminds me a lot of that line from Sandlot. Heroes get remembered, but legends never die.
There we go. What a reference. What a reach in the back. Great reference to close it out.
Thank you. Okay, last question here. This is something that we ask everyone. If someone were to come to Tempe for the very first time, where's the go-to food spot that you're taking them to get the full Tempe, Arizona State experience?
I love this question. I would say to go into Tempe, I would say the answer quickly is culinary dropout.
Okay.
I think you're not going to be upset with anything you find there. If you don't like loud atmosphere, maybe that's going to be your turnoff. But Arizona is kind of like a little hidden culinary spot. We've got Tempe, Scottsdale, Gilbert, Mesa, Paradise Valley. We've got a bunch of different spots, but when you say Tempe specifically, I'll say culinary dropout. If you're waiting for a table, you can go play cornhole, ping pong, foosball. You can go to the bar. If you need a different style of food, they've got large menu there too. They've actually got like a little hidden restaurant in the back called the Coop as well.
Okay.
And I specifically think the location in Tempe is the most unique and most special. But like you said, if I think of a restaurant in Tempe, one of the first places I ever went to is Culinary Dropout, and it's always one of the spots I take anyone there. So I would 10 out of 10 recommend Culinary Dropout. And extra plug, if you go, you need to get the pretzel bites. Just trust me on that. Trust me on that.
Okay. Awesome. Grant, I really appreciate you joining us and talking to us, and Forks Up.
Forks Up. I love it. Thanks for having me, and appreciate being here talking about a topic that matters to me a lot.
Again, thank you so much, Grant.
You're welcome.